The Liches were the first of the Lich King's servants, created even before he was sent to Azeroth. As Ner'zhul unleashed the ritual that would rip Draenor apart, he and his loyal followers, mostly warlocks and death knights, escaped through a dimensional rift into the twisting nether. They were then captured by Kil'jaeden and the Burning Legion, who tortured them by ripping their flesh apart and tormenting their spirits. After Ner'zhul agreed to serve the demons, his spirit was, quote, passed through death and revived as a spectral entity, end quote, then bound to a suit of armor. By contrast, his followers had their bodies, quote, torn asunder and reshaped into powerful undead liches, end quote, following which they, along with several Dreadlord jailers, were sent to Azeroth to prepare the way for the Legion's invasion. As the Scourge expanded, the Lich King, as well as those servants who had the ability to do so, also began creating their own liches, usually as a reward for particularly loyal and powerful members of the Cult of the Damned, with the most infamous example of such being the cult's founder and leader, Kel'thuzad. As is common throughout fantasy works where they appear, the Liches in Warcraft are also known for binding their souls to a Phylactery, which can be mostly any object, though is usually an urn or a gem. The process is one of the first steps of the transformation into a Lich, and is what then grants them immortality. A Lich cannot be killed by destroying their body, as they will simply regenerate a new one afterwards. Instead, their Phylactery must be destroyed. As such, it is both a boon and a great vulnerability, and most Liches usually carry their Phylacteries on themselves or hide them away. This is also what differentiates them from most other undead, who instead have their souls imperfectly attached to their shambling remains. There was, however, an exception to this rule, namely the Lich Ras Frostwhisper. Unlike most others of his kind, he did not bind his soul to a Phylactery, which made it instead cling on to the site of his transformation into a Lich. As a result, when a keepsake from his past life was brought there, the soul was bound to it and then was actually used to turn him back into a human and kill him. Some Liches actually predate the Lich King and the Scourge, though these rare examples function in a similar way, powerful undead spellcasters who have their souls bound to a Phylactery. The most notable example is Naberius, a former Kirin'var mage who has a somewhat similar story to Kel'thuzad's. Naberius accompanied the Alliance expedition into Draenor and then joined his master, Archmage Vargoth, on his expedition to Farallon. Naberius, however, had a hidden interest in necromancy, which the other mages of the expedition strongly discouraged. Naberius betrayed his peers when Prince Kael'thas attacked and destroyed Kirin'var village using a mana bomb, turning over the secrets to Vargoth's tower's defenses, resulting in the defeat of the Kirin'var forces. He survived the attack as a result and, as a form of revenge, he then enslaved the spirits of the former inhabitants of the village, starting with the most powerful mages. Somehow he also managed to turn himself into a Lich, but was later defeated by adventurers who also discovered his enslavement of the spirits. Aside from Naberius, there are also troll Liches in Zandalar, though since trolls have a history of dabbling into necromancy, that is perhaps less surprising. Most of the Liches were loyal to the Lich King, though some instead preferred to serve the Legion. For the most part, these were either sent to Kalimdor as part of the Legion's attack on Ner'zhul and died there, or were killed during the Plagueland Civil War between the forces of Sylvanas, Kel'thuzad, the Dreadlords and the remnants of the Alliance. Notably, among the Kalimdor Liches, there was one who was loyal to the Lich King, Amnenar the Coldbringer. Following Archimonde's defeat, the Lich King ordered this Lich to remain on Kalimdor in order to establish a Scourge power base on the continent. To that end, he took advantage of the Quillbores of the Barons, who had suffered at the hands of the Horde in the Alliance, recruiting them to create a base from which to strike at Orgrimmar and Faramore. There is some discrepancy among the sources in regards to the exact relationship between the Quillbores and Amnenar, namely whether they joined willingly or were slaughtered and raised into undeath. Regardless, there was, nevertheless, a cult of Quillbore, the Death's Head, who willingly worshipped Amnanar and worked towards his revival following the Lich's defeat at the hands of adventurers. It's worth noting that most of the Liches willingly chose to partake in their transformation, often being the ones to kill themselves or bind their own spirit to a phylactery. There is, however, one exception to this rule, namely the Lich Amal'thazad. He was once a powerful frost mage who fought against the Scourge, whose powers greatly impressed the Lich King. As a result, he was raised into undeath as a Lich and was made to serve by instructing new Acheron's Death Knights. Perhaps because of his unwilling transformation, he then joined the Knights of the Ebon Blade when they rebelled against the Lich King, though, like other Liches, he enjoys slaying foes and also practices necromancy.